Manoj and David, welcome to South Africa. It's really good to see you. I've spent a lot of time with you in India. I saw the remarkable work you've done there, starting off several years ago with school feeding, and today we saw your centralized kitchens and feeding over 1 million children a day, a hot, nutritious meal. Perhaps we should start off with that. Tell us how you came to set up Nandi. What was the background? Why did you start with school feeding?
So the idea of Nandi, to be very frank, is credited with government of India and government of Andhra Pradesh. There was this, famous Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu.
Yes.
He came out with this idea just before his second term to the elections. Why don't we do something about outsourcing some of the government programs to a professionally run NGO? Because the government programs are typically meant for the real poor, so you can't give it to a business house, because there is no profit motive.
Yes.
But if you give it to an NGO or a not-for-profit in India, they are all small, doing small-scale programs. So he went to Dr. Reddy, the chairman of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, whom you know, Jay, and is a friend of yours, and told Dr. Reddy that, Dr. Reddy, can you chair an entity called Nandi Foundation, which will outsource programs from government and deliver for us, because we are bad at delivery. And everybody has proven we are bad at implementation of programs. You corporates deliver in a good way, why don't you do that? And he said, what could be an example? He said, look, the Supreme Court has asked all of us to deliver midday meals in schools, and we're not able to do it. Because nobody wants to do it decentralized in urban India, because there is no place in the school to start a kitchen, and fire is hazardous, and economies of scale don't work, so can you try that? That's how the first school feeding idea came. But with that came the idea of an organization that can be run by outsourcing program from government, and we extended it to corporates also. That's the genesis.
Fantastic. And then, that's a similar challenge. Both government and corporate sector, which has social responsibility programs. What's in it for the corporates? I can understand from government side they have to address the needs of the citizens, and the public delivery systems are aimed at reaching the poorest and the poor. What's in it for business to get involved in development in a sustainable way?
See, in India particularly, from the 1990s when the economic reform started, Jay, you know it, that there has been suddenly a lot of wealth created in the corporate sector, because opportunities got better, the global markets opened up for them, information technology or manufacturing or mining companies, they all suddenly started creating wealth, and India had its numbers of billionaires in the Forbes list go up suddenly. But at the same time, there has been two things parallelly happening in India. Media also opened up, civil societies also became bigger, and between the two of them, they started highlighting the inequality in India that was widening. And corporates were very slowly becoming soft targets, that they are not doing enough for the society. They are making money at the cost of the poor. They are exploiting often natural resources to create wealth. And this slowly started snowballing. And smart corporates, enlightened ones, decided that, no, we need to do something. We need to connect. They neither had the expertise nor the exact human resource and wherewithal to go for it. So they looked at organizations like Nandi, which would do things in a professional manner where they can measure outcomes and not just measure the amount of money that they have given. And with that, get a greater brand equity for them, that they are a caring corporate, they are concerned about the society and the earth, and that new framework many corporates started embracing.
Yes, I see Nandi as a 21st century development enterprise. And so, how did you deliver the school feeding program? And then what did you do after that? How did you expand to the activities now that I've invited you all over to Africa to try and replicate?
So, part of this I will answer and part I will ask David to explain. Because what we did is, once we got excited with the school feeding program, we figured out that if you do in scale, and if you have zero corruption as your mandate, then there is enough buffer in government budgets by which you have enough efficiency to get the best talent to work for you also. Of course, we can never pay like corporate companies, but you can give a reasonable amount of money that can attract talent. So if we could do with school feeding, we thought why not do other programs also. So the focus shifted to 3-4 specific ones. Working more with children in terms of supporting, giving them academic support was one, and many corporates loved it. Investing in children, investing in knowledge was something they wanted to position themselves with. Second set of issues was safe drinking water and sanitation was many people's imagination. And
How many people in India don't have access to clean drinking water?
Well, officially speaking, the clean drinking water source is almost not existent in India. In fact, Government of India says it will give only access to water, which is meant for drinking, but it's not potable. So at one level, the whole country is not guaranteed of even one source of clean drinking water, which is portable by WHO standards.
And this was a degradation that happened over the last 40 years, because when I first came to India, it was striking as the fact that you had clean drinking water in these areas, and it deteriorated over this period due to pressure of population and whatnot. This was the striking thing. So what we're dealing with now is something that we faced because we just didn't look and deal with those problems of ecology. Where we started cutting down trees, we started using excess chemicals and pesticides and whatnot, so suddenly all of these accumulative things hit us in the 90s. And that was what was striking.
But this will be post the Green Revolution. Are you saying that the Green Revolution really took us backwards?
Now, there are two things here. One is what they call food security, which is what they were striving for. And the other one, and it was sort of singular, and when we're talking about the Green Revolution, we're talking about what I call the Yellow Revolution, which is essentially 2 grains, rice and wheat, and a little bit of maize. And that was the only thing that was concentrated on. That was the Green Revolution. Everything else was excluded. And so that was concentrated in a certain area. And that created, particularly in those areas where we have the most demand for our clean drinking water, it created in the villages toxic water. And there was a lack of concern for environment, lack of looking after the environment so that our water sources were not polluted. That's essentially what happened.
Now,
So,
if I go back to this, Manoj, the difference between the Nandi Foundation that I have come across is that it's not focused on a single issue, child mortality or health, and then separately education. You see a linkage and an interconnectedness between poverty, inequality, and access to health or education. How does that apply in practice?
No, you're absolutely right. If you look at the Indian scene also, it's predominantly civil society organizations are dominated by one cause. They are for child rights or for water or rainwater harvesting or street kids, but never integrated or comprehensive like we do. I should say we learned it from communities and the poor people that we need to be integrated and not stand alone. Because when we started doing the school feeding program, we were serving the government's requirement of delivering meals, but that took us closer to children and parents. And when we did it, the parents started telling, look, you're feeding the kids, this is great, but can you worry about kids who are 0 to 5 age group and not yet in school? Then we started thinking about that. Then some of the parents said, these kids are not learning in school. In fact, they are coming to school only for your meal. Can you do something about learning levels? Can you give them tuition? Now, once we did all this, and we heard the government call us for another contract, which was to revive defunct irrigation schemes. So we started working with farmers first time. When we started working with farmers, now they started telling, look, can we really do organic farming? Why? They said, no, we don't have that much money for fertilizers and pesticides. And we also have heard of stories that after a time the fertilizer and pesticides leads to less yield. So can you look into the science? In fact, that's the first time Nandi's team, including me, who are a bunch of generalists with a lot of passion, decided we need to figure out how to do agriculture. So we went and discovered David. And so David, farmers are asking, should we do organic or non-organic?
Yes.
And he said, no, let me get into that much more detail. So one led to another, and the community told us that how can poverty be like a single, there is no single bullet or vaccine for this. It's all interconnected. We need education, we need healthcare, and that's how we built expertise.
But David, the really interesting question, because when you, because there's a big debate and controversy about organic versus GMO, and a lot of, a lot gets thrown in the faces of people who talk about organic, but you are just interested in a little niche market of middle-class people who can afford it. But you have a different view on this.
Yeah, in fact, my view was very much challenged with when I met Manoj, and basically he was saying, look, if organic farming can't do scale, I'm not interested. And that led me to thinking, because I'd been working with the organic movement in a very frustrated way for 35 years. And what struck me is that everything was in pilot, basically, what we call pilot.
Yes.
In very small scale, and it was generated towards export. It was to do with high value, putting it into high priced into boutiques and whatnot, if it was in India. And so it was not actually able, because of the economies of scale, or the lack of economies of scale, it was not able to deliver at a price that was affordable to everyone.
So what changed on this?
My belief was that organic farming is the most economic of all if it's done on scale. But I'd never found an organization that was interested. Plus, on top of that, we got stuck in a mindset, if you like, with the certification issues. Because certification, if people were, there was this idea that you had to be certified, you had to have an auditor who knew nothing about agriculture would come in and tell you, yes, this is organic. And that would make it organic. And people perceived it that way. So basically it was a complete revolution to say, hey, wait a minute, organic is for people. And organic is not to do organic in order to get a specialized product to export it to Europe. That's not the issue. The issue is to have safe to eat food. And this was where when I came in touch with Manoj, this was the challenge, was like, how do we get safe to eat food for people? For the people of India. And that was the interesting challenge.
So let us go back to this, because that was my fascination when I went to the Araku Valley. Tell us a bit of the story behind Araku Valley, because this is where I read about the Naxalite insurgency, the Maoist insurgency, where government really could not operate. How did you get into this valley where it was really dangerous?
So I'll take off from where David left, and I think to specifically answer your question, Jay, the game changer in organic farming was scale. It was always done in kitchen gardens, in middle class homes, or by some NGO as an experiment, and it never looked like the mass production solution. So when David and I met, and David said, oh my God, you are the first organization to ask me to do organic farming in scale, and do it because it will guarantee food and nutrition security on one hand, and it will guarantee livelihoods for farmers by ensuring that the cost will be less and that the yield will be more. If that was the challenge to prove, he said, take me to a place where you can get me so many small farmers who are not already schooled in chemical fertilizer. So when we looked around, we said, David, there is a remote place. It's completely virgin in terms of use of chemical fertilizer. But this is an insurgency area. Farmers are all indigenous people, low literacy levels. He said, if we can prove it there, we can prove it anywhere in the world, let's go there.
Yes.
The only non-negotiable we agreed was scale. So when we went there, we took around 2 to 3 years actually to get a group of 1,000 landless people to come together to this experiment. Because they also were told by government that if farming has to be viable, use fertilizer. So 3 years of befriending them, putting their children to school, helping their women to deliver properly, all these non-livelihood activities we started gently doing with support from other organizations, and we won their trust. Then they started listening to David. Otherwise, here was this white man claiming to be Indian, coming and telling do organic in the insurgency area.
Yes.
And so it was a complex thing. But once we got the trust, they agreed, and many of the elders said, but this is what we are good at.
Basically, it was a question of nurturing those instincts. That was a key element.
So what's the key pillars of this this model that is different to the thousands of models, the white elephant projects I see all over the world, where philanthropists and do-gooders and bilateral donors and governments just throw money into a project? What differentiates the Araku model from those many failed experiments at promoting small-scale agriculture?
First of all, it was the scale. That was the key element, as Manoj said. Secondly, it was the planning. You see, you cannot go into an area that's been decimated, that doesn't have any biomass, that doesn't have the skills, that the soil has been degraded, the carbon has been depleted. You can't go there and say, hey, wait a minute, in 1 year we're going to have a turnaround.
We knew that what we said, what we were planning was right, so we set about it, we got our budgets right, and we did it in a planned phase. And that was critical. First of all, building up biomass. We need biomass in order to be able to create compost.
What's biomass for
Okay,
ordinary people?
biomass essentially means, like, for instance, in the paddy fields, let's say, of old, they always used to grow legumes all around, and they didn't have any fertilizers. So they used to chop the legumes every season, put it into the paddy field, puddle it, break it down, and that was their fertilizer.
Mhm.
What do they do when the Green Revolution comes? Is you maximize production. You take away all of that was going to interfere with the sun's rays and everything. You whack everything off. You take all the trees out, and we'll give you the fertilizer. We'll give you the energy in the form of urea and superphosphate and potassium. So that was what happened is you got that degradation, and suddenly you had no biomass in which to go back to those ancient methods.